I was late to Christmas dinner. When I opened the door, my son-in-law was raising a glass and saying, "Good thing the old man didn't come." He ruins everything. I closed the door, got back in the car, and made one phone call that changed his Christmas forever. My name is Samuel Whitaker. I'm 72 years old, a widower, and a grandfather of 2. My wife, Evelyn, died 3 winters ago. I still talk to her when the house gets too quiet. I built roads and bridges for 40 years and put my hands on things that still stand. I believe that counted for something when the storms came. After Evelyn passed, I gave more than I should have. I co-signed a mortgage so my daughter Nora and her husband Mason could have a bigger place. I put money into Mason's restaurant when he swore he just needed one bridge to cross the slow season. I told myself this was what family meant. I told myself I was honoring my wife when I helped our kids build a life. I was slow to learn that some people take your help and use it to climb high enough to look down on you. Snow clung to the steps when I reached their porch. I had a tin of fudge in one hand and a bottle of Red Evelyn used to enjoy in the other. The porch light had been replaced with one of those cold white bulbs that make everything look like a showroom. Through the window I saw the big tree I had paid for, glowing like a department store ad, and the table I had refinished last spring, loaded with food. I was late because I had stopped at the cemetery. I always stopped there on Christmas. Evelyn used to say the day ran slower when we remembered who we were. I stood a few minutes too long, and the highway was slick, and I arrived after 7. I opened the door and heard him before anyone saw me. Mason lifted his glass and smiled like a man who owned the room. "Good thing the old man didn't come," he said. "He ruins everything." No one corrected him. Not my daughter. Not my grandchildren. A silence settled, the kind that tells the truth. I closed the door as quietly as I had opened it. I did not step inside. I did not speak. I took the 2 steps back to the porch and felt the cold bite through my coat, clean and honest in a way that room was not. In the car, the heater fought the frost. My hands shook, but not from the weather. I set the fudge on the passenger seat, buckled it in like it was made of glass, and stared at my reflection in the dark window. My face looked older than it had this morning. Small thoughts broke through the noise. Lily would open her present later and pretend not to miss me. Ben would whisper questions in the hallway. Nora would say, "Dad had other plans." Mason would tell the story later like a joke about the old man who finally got the hint. Number. I had heard enough hints this year to fill a book. I scrolled to a name I had saved a long time ago and never used. The screen glowed in the dark cabin. For a moment my thumb hung above the green button. I thought of Evelyn's last Christmas. She had sat by the fire and stitched patches on Lily's backpack because things deserve to be mended if they can be. I pressed call. The ring cut through the engine hum. It sounded like a countdown. When the voice answered, I spoke clearly, because I wanted to remember the words. "It's me," I said. "I'm ready." I let the call end and sat very still. The wipers pushed a line of snow back and forth, back and forth. The glass fogged at the edges. I could smell the old leather of my seat and a trace of Evelyn's vanilla hand lotion on the tin, because I had kept the bottle in my glove box all year like a fool. I was not angry. Not the kind that shouts. The kind that sets a table and chooses where to place the knife. I thought about the last 3 years. How the house felt like a museum, and how I tried to fill it with people so it would not echo. How I gave them what they asked for, because I missed saying yes to someone. I signed papers without being asked twice. I wrote checks with a note on the memo line. For the kids, for the family, for you. When Mason called the first time about the restaurant, he had said, "A small investment, Samuel. Just tide us over." He shook my hand with both of his like he was sealing a covenant. I had believed him. I even helped pick the paint colors for the dining room. The week it opened, he stood beside the bar and introduced me to a supplier as Silent Money, and laughed like that was charm. I told myself he was nervous. I told myself a lot of things. Loyalty is a good coat. It keeps you warm until someone sets it on fire. The phone buzzed again. A text. We can talk Monday. I typed back, tonight, not a court, not a threat, a simple fact. The 3 dots blinked and then vanished. He had decided I could wait. He always decided that. The memory of last Thanksgiving walked through me like a draft. Mason had made a joke about old people apartments while I stood by the sink rinsing a dish. Nora let out a thin laugh and said nothing when he added, he should be somewhere with supervision. I had swallowed it like a bitter pill. The children had gone quiet the way children do when the air turns mean. Shame has a taste. I had learned to live with it. I had learned to cut it into small pieces and pretend I didn't notice. The phone vibrated again. A different name lit up the screen. My banker. I answered and kept my voice low. I need the help you offered, I said. I want the protection we lined up for emergencies. He did not ask what kind. He had seen me prepare. Months ago I had sat in his office with a folder and a steady face, and he had said, "You are careful, Mr. Whitaker." I had told him I was only old. "Can you come in the morning?" he asked. "I'll be there at 8, I said. "Are you sure?" he asked. "It will move quickly." "That is the point," I said. When I ended the call, my reflection stared back at me from the blank screen. I touched the photo of Evelyn on my dashboard. "I waited," I said. "I waited as long as I could." I started the car. The tires crunched over the thin crust of ice. I did not look back at the house. I had seen enough of it on the outside to know how empty it was inside. I drove into the dark and did not turn on the radio. I kept replaying his words in my head, like a scratch on a record. Good thing the old man didn't come. He ruins everything. Not everything, I thought. Not yet. A week before, we had stood on their back porch in the kind of cold that burns the inside of the nose. The kids were inside playing a video game that roared like a small war. Mason leaned against the rail and wore that expensive coat he liked to remind me he had earned. Nora had invited me for soup and sent me home before dessert. She said she had an early morning. She meant they had plans without me. He had a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "You know, Samuel," he said, "we've been talking about options for you. Practical ones." He glanced at Nora to make sure she was watching him handle me. There are communities for this stage of life, places with people your age. It would take a load off Nora. I studied the ice on the steps because I wanted to keep my hands still. "I manage fine," I said. "It's not about managing," he said. "It's about fit." "You don't fit our plans." He said it like he was discussing furniture. He said it like he was a good man doing a hard thing. Nora stared at the yard. "Dad," she said softly, "please do not make a scene." "I'm asking a question," I said. "Whose plans?" Mason laughed a little. "Come on, don't be sensitive. We're being practical." Then, as if this were kindness, he added, "We can sell the cabin. That will help. You hardly use it, the cabin. The only place where I could hear Evelyn's voice in the wood. The place where the grandchildren learned to fish and where Nora learned to drive." He wore the word hardly like a knife. "You do not touch the cabin," I said. "Samuel," he said, "be reasonable. It is just a place. We need to think about value." He said the word value, and I looked at my daughter. She flinched and then softened her face the way she does when she wants a storm to pass. "We'll talk later," she said. "Not now." I swallowed the anger. I swallowed what I should have said. I walked to my car and turned the key and sat there trembling because all the old promises in my bones started to rattle loose. I told myself it would pass. It always had. They would apologize. They would be kind again when the bills came due and they needed someone to say yes. They did not apologize. Instead, 2 days after that porch talk, I found a glossy flyer in my mailbox with the cabin's living room on the cover. "Lakefront Gym," it said. Staged pillows. My wife's quilt folded just so. I stared at the photo until the words blurred. Then I tucked it under the sun visor and drove to the lake alone, because I needed to see it with my own eyes. I found a lockbox on my own door. On the drive back, I pulled over because my hands were shaking. A neighbor had seen the photographer at the cabin and wrote the date on a note for me. He said the old man won't fight, the note read. Maybe that should have been the moment I drew the line. Instead, I folded the paper and put it in my breast pocket and told myself I needed to keep the peace. Peace is a good thing, but peace without respect is just silence. My house was dark when I came home from their street. I did not turn on the overhead light. I set the fudge on the table and the bottle of red beside it, and stared at them both like I had brought gifts to a stranger who did not answer the door. I went to the hall closet and reached up where the shelf met the wall. My fingers found the cold edge of steel. I slid the small box down and carried it to the kitchen table. The hinges squeaked when I opened it. That sound took me back to other winters and other decisions. Inside were things I had kept because Evelyn taught me to keep them. I had made copies when I was calm, not angry. I had labeled them when I could still believe I would never need them. There was a folder with old receipts from the first months I helped the restaurant get off the ground, not to wave at Mason, to remember what I had carried. There was a photo of the cabin from the day we put in the dock. Evelyn's hair was shorter then. The kids were small and loud and covered in lake water. I breathed until my hands stopped shaking. There were also papers that had weight beyond their paper weight. Agreements with my name on them. My banker had explained them once, simple as he could, and I had nodded. I did not love documents. I loved protection. These were my seatbelts. They were not for show. I laid everything out in neat rows. I am an engineer by training. Straight lines calm me. I looked at the lines until the anger untied inside me and something quieter rose. Not revenge, not spite, just a steady need to fix what had been broken. Not everything can be mended, Evelyn had said, but some things can be reinforced. On top of the papers, I set 2 other items, a thumb drive with copies of what mattered, and the note from the neighbor. I smoothed it with my palm. The words were simple. The message was not. For a long time I sat at the table and listened to the refrigerator hum. I pictured Nora as a little girl on the cabin steps, holding a frog like a treasure and yelling for me to look. I pictured her now, standing next to a man who said I was in the way. Both pictures were true. That is the hard part of love. I slid the box closer to me and spoke out loud because I needed to hear my own voice. You told me to take care of them, I said to the empty room. I am. I am taking care of what you left me to guard. I closed the lid and clicked the latch. The sound felt final. I carried the box to the front door and set it by my boots so I could not forget it in the morning. Then I turned off the lamp and stood in the dark hall where our wedding photo still hangs. My hand found the switch, but I did not flip it. Tomorrow, I said, we stop pretending. They thought shutting the door on me would end the story. This time I wasn't going to raise my voice. I was going to raise the ground they stood on, until the house they built on my back came crashing down around them. Soon my revenge would come to life, and you don't want to miss it. But before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I slept in my chair with the lamp on and the box by my boots. Sometime before dawn, my phone buzzed. I thought it was spam. It was a voicemail from Lily. Her voice was a whisper, the kind children use when they think walls have ears. Grandpa, I tried to tell Mom you should come, she said. She said it is better if Mason doesn't get upset. He said after Christmas we are going to the cabin for a final visit, and then it will be gone. He said you will be moved by spring. Don't tell him I called. The message ended with the sound of her breath catching. I played it again because I needed to be sure I had heard what I had heard. Final visit. Moved by spring. I did not cry. I did not have tears left for men like Mason. But the ache was sharp and clean. I saved the message and filed it in a folder with a simple name, Keep. I went to my old desktop and woke it up. The screen showed our last family photo at the lake. Lily held a fish like a trophy. Ben made a face at the camera. Evelyn's quilt fluttered on the railing. I opened my email because I remembered something that had bothered me months back and then slipped away under all the small hurts. It took a few searches to find it. The subject line was Photos for Listing Draft, sent by a realtor to Mason. He had forwarded it to Nora, and because the universe sometimes makes a point, he had also forwarded it to me by mistake. It was from October. The body read, "Once your father-in-law signs, we go live." I stared at the chain until my jaw locked. There were attachments. I opened them. The living room, the dock, the kitchen window where Evelyn used to wave when I came back from the boat. He had planned this before Thanksgiving, before the porch talk, before the old people apartments joke. He had already measured my life and priced it out. I printed the email chain and the thumbnails, one to a page so the images would not blur. Each sheet slid onto the tray like a small verdict. I put them in the folder with Lily's message. I put a copy on the thumb drive and set it back by the box. The phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. It was the realtor. Mason asked me to confirm keys for lake property. "We will handle showings discreetly." There was a smiley face at the end. I stared at the tiny curved line until I felt my pulse in my fingers. I typed back, "There will be no showings." I did not hit send. Not yet. Not like this. I took a breath and tried to steady my hands. I was a father and a grandfather before I was anything else. I was a husband once, and I wanted to be the kind of man Evelyn would know if she walked through the door, the kind who does not shout but does not yield. I clipped the folder shut. The house was quiet and gray in the winter light. The clock in the hall ticked like a slow hammer. It was time to see what they had done in daylight, not shadows. It was time to be certain. I put on my coat and grabbed the keys. The box by my boots stayed where it was. It would be waiting when I returned. I was going to the lake. The highway to the lake felt longer than usual. Frost rolled off the pastures like smoke. I drove with the heater on low and my jaw clenched. When the trees thickened and the water flashed through the branches, my heart did something I could not control. It stuttered. It pushed up memories I had not asked for. Evelyn kneeling on the dock to tie Lily's shoe. Ben begging to jump one more time. Nora sunburned and laughing and young. The turnoff to our road had a new stake in the ditch, a wooden post with a red ribbon tied near the top, fresh paint on the head. A sign waited on the back seat of a truck up ahead. A man in a vest lifted it like a shovel. He didn't see me until I stopped right next to him. His smile was automatic. "Morning. You found us early." "What are you putting in the ground?" I asked. "Open house next week," he said. "Lakefront gem. You're going to love it." "It is not yours to sell," I said. My voice did not rise. It stayed level. It scared him more than shouting would have. He let the sign drop back onto the truck and took a step away. "Sir, I know what you are," I said. "A man doing a job. Put the sign back in your truck and drive away. Call who you need to call. Tell them you met the owner." He left. He did not argue. The ribbon fluttered and then went still. I drove down to the cabin and pulled into the gravel. My gravel. A silver lockbox hung from the front door like a joke. The windows were too clean and the curtains were wrong. They had pulled mine down and put up white panels that looked like hospital sheets. I walked the porch slow, touching the rail Evelyn and I had sanded together, and I thought about the day months ago when I found a glossy flyer in my mailbox with these same rooms on it. I had told myself I could be patient. I had told myself I could bear it. A car rounded the bend and stopped behind me. A woman climbed out with a camera and a clipboard. She wore a scarf and a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Hi," she said. "Are you the seller?" I brought new staging notes. I looked at her for a long time. No, I said. I am the one person who will never be your seller. She tried to hold the smile. Mason said, I know what he said, I answered. I know all the things he said. She glanced at the lockbox like it might help. We can schedule showings by appointment, of course. I took my phone and lifted it. I photographed the box, the front door, the lockbox code tag, the plate on her car. Then I put the phone away. Go back to your office, I said. Do not come back here. She left without arguing. The gravel popped under her tires as she pulled away. I stood in the cold air and felt my hands go numb. I put them in my pockets and found the neighbor's note there, soft from folding. He said the old man won't fight. I had been that old man too many times this year. I locked the gate at the top of the drive and slid the chain through like I had done 1,000 times. I took one last look at the water. Then I turned and walked back to the truck. I knew what came next. I knew who needed to hear me say it to his face. Mason was on the phone on his front steps when I pulled to the curb. He ended the call fast when he saw me. Nora stood in the doorway holding the dog back by the collar. She had that tightness in her mouth that said she had been crying or was about to. I did not want to make my daughter cry. I wanted to make her wake up. Samuel, Mason said like we were friends who had run into each other at the store. What a surprise. I went to the lake, I said. He shifted, then spread his hands. Good. See, you still go. We just... Take my cabin off your list, I said. Now. A muscle jumped in his cheek. It's not yours if you can't use it. Nora said my name like a warning. Dad. Don't, I said to her soft. Let him finish his sentence. I want to hear the full thought. Mason took a step closer, like proximity was power. It's wasted where it is. We need that equity. You can move somewhere that makes sense. There are options. We've researched it. You'll be comfortable. Comfortable. Like this was a couch. Like I was a piece of furniture that could be relocated to make a room look better. I took the folded note from my pocket and handed it to him. He didn't take it. Read it, I said. Then I'll talk. He plucked it like it was dirty. He scanned the line. He said the old man won't fight, and tried to hand it back. I didn't take it. Here's what you've done, I said, steady. You talked about me like I was a bill. You listed my place without my permission. You dragged my daughter into it. You made my granddaughter whisper on Christmas Eve. You put a lockbox on my door. You took a step too far. His voice rose. We didn't put a lockbox. Don't lie, I said. It makes you small. Nora stared at me with wet eyes. Dad, please. We can talk about this inside. We will not talk about this inside, I said. We will not talk about this with a man who calls my life wasted. I looked at her, and I let her see all of it. The years, the mornings, the promises I had kept when no one was watching. I remember you when you were kind, I said. Find her. Mason laughed once, sharp. You think you can stop a sale with a speech? I almost smiled. No, I said. I am not a speech. He looked confused. That was fine. Confusion was a step toward fear. Behind him the dog let out a small whine. The house smelled like cinnamon and meat and all the things that should have been ours tonight. I'm making a record, I said, and you just added your voice to it. He scoffed. What does that mean? It means you should answer your phone, I said, because the next time it rings, your day will change. He followed me down the steps like he wanted to keep his shadow on mine. You're not going to threaten me on my property, he said. That is not how this works. I turned under the bare maple and faced him. I do not threaten, I said. I decide. Nora came onto the porch with her arms crossed against the cold. Can we please talk like family for once? Family doesn't do what he did, I said without looking away from him. Mason tried to smile again. It looked brittle now. Let us compromise, he said. We keep the house in town. You sell the cabin, and we revisit your situation in the spring. That is fair. You want fair, I asked. I will give you fair. He tilted his head, that little quick jerk he does when he thinks he's cornered you. Oh? I raised one hand, palm open, and lowered my voice so the words would land. I need one thing, Mason. Say the quiet part where my daughter can hear you. Say you want me out because I am in your way. His mouth opened. Nothing came. He looked at Nora, then back at me. He tried to find a safe sentence and could not. Just say it, I prompted. We'll all breathe easier when it is said. Nora's face crumpled. Stop, she whispered. Please. I held her eyes. I love you, I said. I love your children. I am not leaving my life to make room for a man who takes and laughs. Mason found his voice. It came out harder than he meant. You don't get to judge me. I have built something here. I provide, you spend, I said. He stepped forward again. What are you going to do? Cut us off? You would hurt your own grandchildren? The question was dirty. It was a trick wrapped in a concern. I let it hit and pass through. I will always feed them, I said. I will always keep them warm. I will not keep you warm. Nora made a sound that was almost a sob. I wanted to reach for her and could not. Some bridges you cross and some you stand on while the other person chooses. Go back inside, I said to her. Please, put the kids to bed. Tell them I love them. I turned to him. You and I are done tonight. He smirked like he had won a small point. Because you say so? Because I say so, I said. And because you forgot something important. What is that? He asked. You forgot who bought your Christmas, I said. And who can take it back? The night wind cut through my coat as I walked to the truck. The world looked sharp. The stars were cold and steady. I sat behind the wheel and rested my forehead on the rim for a few seconds because the weight in my chest had shifted from sorrow to something harder. My phone lit up before I could start the engine. A text from my banker. Are you still on for morning? I typed, yes. Then, we do it all. He replied with a single word, understood. I put the phone down and stared at my hands. They were my father's hands at this age. Brown spots, scars. The line where a nail had once slipped and taken a piece of me with it. Those hands had built the dock and the crib and the frame around the kitchen window where Evelyn used to stand. They had paid bills and fixed engines and signed checks with a steady pen. They had lifted grandchildren and folded flags. They were not finished. I thought about Lily's whisper, Ben's crooked grin, Nora's face as she stood on that porch and tried to choose peace over truth. I felt the old guilt try to rise and I pressed it down. Guilt had kept me quiet too long. I started the engine and drove the long way home because I needed time to be sure I would not soften. Softness is a good thing in a blanket. It is not a good thing in a line you have to draw. On the kitchen table, the small box waited like a sleeping dog. I set my keys down beside it and opened the lid. The folder, the printouts, the note, the thumb drive. I did not read them again. I knew what they said. I knew what they meant. I slid them into my coat pocket so they would warm with my body heat. I poured a glass of water and held it until my hands stopped shaking. I pictured the morning. His face when the phone rang and the life he had built on me began to tilt. Not fall. Tilt. That is worse. Falling is fast. Tilting takes time. It forces a man to watch what he has done and what he has broken. I went to the hall and took down the wedding photo. Evelyn had daisies in her hair. My tie was crooked. We looked like children who thought they were grown. I will do this right, I said to her. I will do this clean. My phone buzzed again. A new message. Mason. It was short. Call me when you calm down. I put the phone face down on the table and turned off the lamp. The house settled into its creaks and sighs. The retribution hour was closer than ever. I was outside the bank before it opened, coffee cooling in my hands, the winter air working on my bones. The street was quiet. A woman walked a dog in a red knit sweater. A man scraped his windshield with a credit card. I watched the sun fight its way up over the brick buildings and thought about the last good Christmas with Evelyn. She had tucked a ribbon in my coat pocket and said, "You're my home." I touched that pocket now like I might find the ribbon there still. At 8 on the dot, the door clicked, and my banker, Mr. Ellis, held it for me. He did not say much. He did not need to. We sat in his small office that smelled like toner and dust, and I set the folder on the desk. My thumb drive lay on top of it like a small piece of iron. "You're sure?" he said. "Yes," I said. He looked at me, not the papers. "All right." I called the number from last night while he worked. A second voice picked up after one ring. "Morning, Mr. Whitaker." "Good morning," I said. "Please do what we discussed." Today, understood. "No surprises," I said. "No noise." "Straight lines, he repeated. I ended the call and stared at my hands. The left knuckle still carried a scar from the dock we built one summer when the boards kept splintering. Evelyn had pressed a bandage there and scolded me for working without gloves. "You're not 20, she had said, smiling. I had laughed and kept hammering. The printer in Ellis's office hummed. Papers slid out clean and warm. He placed them in front of me with the care you use for something that can change a room. I did not want to read them again. I knew what they did. I had frozen Mason's operating line, recalled the collateral pledge, and triggered the audit clause buried in the investment agreement, the legal tripwire we signed when I wired his first loan. They took back the things I had extended. They turned off the quiet streams I had opened and said, without shouting, "Enough." "Do you want to reconsider, Mr. Whitaker?" he asked. "No," I said. "We have children to protect." He nodded like we had said everything. I sent one message before I left the office. It went to 3 people. The subject line was simple. My property. My decision. I attached 4 images. The lockbox on my door, the realtor's draft photos, the email chain with Mason's forward date circled, and a page with my signature from the day I funded his dream. No arguments, no paragraphs. I pressed send and watched the small bar crawl until it was done. Outside, the wind cut through my coat, and I welcomed it. My phone vibrated in my pocket so often it felt like a second heartbeat. I did not look yet. I stood on the sidewalk and breathed winter. I decided on one sentence I would use if I needed it. When the first call came through, I answered. Mason did not bother with hello. "What did you do?" I kept my voice level. "I made a correction." "You can't." "I did," I said. "Listen to me. The children will be fed. The heat will stay on where it should. The cabin is mine, and whatever you thought you built on me will feel different by lunch." He swore under his breath. "You petty." I hung up. I had said what mattered. I put the phone in my coat and felt the weight of it like a tool, not a leash. I walked to my truck and turned the key and saw my face in the rear view. The lines around my mouth looked like they had decided something years ago, and maybe they had. I shifted into drive and pointed myself toward his restaurant. He had asked me once what I would do if he pushed me too far. I had smiled then and let it pass. I understood now that I had been answering all along. I parked across from Mason's restaurant and watched the lunch crew move like a flock behind the glass. Steam on the windows. A woman carrying a tub of silverware. A man wiping a chalkboard sign. The door swung open and closed, and a slice of warm air reached me where I sat. My phone lit up again and again. Nora. "Dad, what is happening?" The realtor. "We need to resolve this." The church elder. "Are you all right?" I typed the same reply to each. "I am." Then I sent one more message to Nora, just for her. The kids come first. Always I crossed the street with my coat zipped to my throat. The hostess smiled without seeing me and asked if I wanted a table. I shook my head and moved past her the way you move past a stranger. The floorboards shouted under my boots. The walls wore the paint I had helped pick. It was a color Evelyn liked, the kind that warms a room without calling attention to itself. Mason came from the kitchen with his jaw set. "You don't belong back here," he said. "Neither do some people," I said. I reached into my coat and took out the lockbox photo. I set it on the end of the bar. Then the email printout with the October date. Then the realtor's draft. He looked down like the pages burned. "You're dramatic," he said. "You're careless," I said. "There's a difference." "You're ruining my day," he snapped. I almost laughed. "Your day?" He leaned close enough that I could see the small nick where he'd rushed shaving. "You will fix this." "No," I said. "You will feel this." He started to answer, but the front door opened hard enough to rattle the hinges. 2 men and a woman stepped in with coats still on. They did not wear uniforms. They didn't need to. One of them spoke to the hostess, then moved past us and walked the dining room slow, eyes on the things that would matter if a place needed to be held still. The woman opened a back door and looked into a storage room. And then of what I had set in motion stood there like weather. "What are they doing?" Mason asked, voice too high. "You called people to embarrass me?" "I called no one to embarrass you," I said. "I called to stop something that should never have started." He grabbed the bar stool and white-knuckled the back of it. A server peered around a corner, confused. The chalkboard sign out front toppled in a gust and clacked against the sidewalk. One of the men approached us. "We'll be quick," he said. "Just need to check a few items." Mason looked at me like I had pulled the sun out of the sky. "You can't let them do this." "I can," I said. "And I already did." He tried to step past the man. The man held up a hand, gentle, and Mason stopped like he'd run into glass. "Do not make a scene," I told him. "You're the one who likes practical." He stared at me with something like hatred now. "You think people will take your side?" "I did not ask for sides," I said. "I asked for respect." Outside, the winter light went sharp, the kind that makes everything look honest. I watched it move across the bar top, the same wood I had rubbed down with oil the week they opened, while Mason fumbled for a sentence that would get him his way. The sentence did not come. The room began to understand where the power had moved. By noon, the heat in the dining room felt wrong because no one was eating. The staff gathered in pockets, whispering. The woman in the coat posted a simple paper on the front door with blue tape. "Closed for audit. Back soon." A lie that told the truth. People pressed their faces to the glass and then drifted away, confused. "Give me your phone," Mason said to the hostess. He was trying to call people who could save him. The phone stayed in her apron. She looked at me instead of at him, which told me everything about the last year that I had not wanted to know. A man with a tool bag walked in. He had a square jaw and quiet eyes, and the kind of hands that fix things for a living. He nodded to me like he knew who had called him and why. He went to the back door and stood there waiting, respectful, as if listening for permission to start. Mason tried to make it sound small. "You're changing locks," he said. "On Christmas week. You're heartless." "I am tired," I said. He laughed, too loud, broken. "Of what? Being generous?" "Of being erased," I said. "In rooms I built." The man with the tool bag worked fast. Short turns, clean clicks. The new key felt heavy when he handed it to me. I did not hide it. I laid it on the bar top beside the photo of the lockbox, and I let Mason see me lay it there. "You can't just—" he started. "I can," I said, And I have a 10-year history of doing the right thing when it is hard. You have a 3-year history of doing the easy thing when it is wrong. I have employees, he said, and for the first time I heard something like fear in his voice. They have families. The children will be fed, I said again. I am not you. He shut his mouth on the last retort that wanted to come out. He stared at the paper on the door until his eyes glossed with it. Hunter green paint, simple tape, a word that ends a day. Closed. Nora arrived then. She pushed through the door fast and stopped when she saw the room. The staff. The men in coats. Her eyes found the key on the bar. "What did you do?" she asked, but she was not asking me. She was asking herself. I turned to her and kept my voice soft. "I did not come to hurt you." "You're hurting us," Mason said, trying to speak for her. I did not look at him. "Nora," I said, "come with me." We stepped to the side hallway by the office where the photos of their so-called grand opening still hung. In the first one, I was in the background, out of focus, carrying flowers. She swallowed. "Dad, this is a lot." "I know," I said, "but you know what he did at the lake." Her eyes filled. "I know." She whispered it. "I told him to stop." "Did you?" I asked, and I let the question sit there without force behind it. She closed her eyes. On the other side of the wall, a glass clinked and rolled. A server apologized. The building sighed like old buildings do when winter presses against them. I reached into my coat and took out a worn little booklet. Inside were the notes and receipts for Lily and Ben's savings, the amounts I had tucked aside each month when no one was watching. I handed it to her. "Look," I said, "whatever happens here, they are covered." Her thumb shook when she turned the page. "You did this alone," she said. "Yes," I said, "and I will keep doing it. But I will not carry him." She looked toward the bar where Mason stood with his hands on his hips, small and loud without a word. She hugged the booklet to her chest like she was cold. "He says you're making this personal." "It is personal," I said. "You're my daughter." She breathed in through her nose like she might break. "What now?" "Now he learns how it feels," I said, "and you decide who you are." We came back to the bar together. Mason saw the booklet in her hands and misread it as a sign of victory. "Good," he said. "Show him what he's risking." Nora didn't speak. She slid the booklet into her purse like a mother slides a medicine into her bag and keeps moving. There was a steadiness in her shoulders I hadn't seen in a long time. Mason pointed at the key. "Give it." I put my hand on it. "No." He curled his mouth into something he thought was a smile. "You think this scares me?" "I can rebuild." "You can," I said, "but not on me." He took a step, chest out, trying the kind of posture that looks like manhood from a distance. Up close it looked like a boy who had never been told no and was hearing it now from the floor, the walls, the winter light. "Say it," I told him. He blinked. "Say what?" "Say you went too far." He laughed through his nose. "You want a confession?" "I want the truth," I said. He stared at the papers on the bar, the lockbox photo, the email date, the draft flyer. His eyes flicked to Nora, who did not move toward him. He set his jaw like a carpentry vise. "Fine," he said at last, bitter. "We were going to sell it. We were going to move you where you belong. It was necessary. Happy?" "No," I said, "but I'm satisfied." He leaned in so close I could smell the coffee on his breath. "You're cruel." "I'm careful," I said, "and you mistook kindness for permission." He made a sound in his throat, ugly. "You did this on Christmas week," he said. "What kind of grandfather ruins the holidays?" "The kind who refuses to be erased by New Year's," I said. The woman from the front door approached, hat in her hands now. "We're done for today," she told me. "We'll be in touch." Mason rounded on her. "You can't." She looked at him with professional boredom. "Sir, please keep your voice down." He swore again, a word too big for his mouth, and kicked the leg of a chair. It skittered and fell. Everyone in the room flinched. He stood there panting, face red, eyes hard, and I saw then what I had refused to see. The smallness under all that noise. "Don't do that," Nora said quietly. "Not in front of your staff. Not in front of me." It shut him like a hand on a switch. I picked up the key. It felt heavy and honest in my palm. I slid it into my coat pocket where it hit the folder and the note, and settled there like it had been waiting for the company. "We're done," I said to him, "for now." He took a step after me, then stopped. "You'll regret this," he called. "No," I said without turning, "but you will remember it." Outside, the air bit hard. Cars hissed past on sleet-wet pavement. I walked to the far end of the lot where the light was better and waited. I knew Nora would follow. She did. We stood beside my truck, breath showing in small clouds. She wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't know how to fix any of this," she said. "You don't have to fix it," I said. "You just have to stop helping him break it." She nodded once, a little desperate. "He says I owe him, that he built this life for us, that you can't stand losing control." "I built you a life," I said. "He built himself a stage." She let out a short breath that might have been a laugh if it didn't hurt. "God, Dad." "I am not asking you to leave your husband," I said. "I'm asking you to choose your children over his pride." She stared at the wet blacktop. "He's going to be furious." "He already is," I said. "That is his problem." I reached into my coat one last time and pulled out a plain white envelope. I handed it to her. Inside were 2 simple pages. The first, a letter I had written last night setting up automatic deposits to Lily and Ben's accounts, effective immediately. The second, a short note in my hand for Lily to read when she is older. "You were always seen." Nora held the envelope like it might burn her. "You're doing this without me?" "I am doing it for you," I said. "You can be part of it if you want. Or you can keep standing beside a man who calls me waste while he spends what I earned. I won't fund that anymore." She closed her eyes and pressed the envelope to her chest, the way she had held her children when they were sick. When she opened them again, there was a steadier light there. "If I choose you," she said, "we lose him. If you choose him," I said, "you lose yourself." The door to the restaurant banged open. Mason came out fast, no coat, anger making its own heat. "Nora," he shouted, "get back inside. We have to do damage control." She did not move. He reached the edge of the overhang and saw the envelope in her hand, and understood one thing he had not planned for. I was not alone. "Don't you dare," he said to her. She looked at him like he was already far away. Then she slid the envelope into her purse and turned her body so she was facing me. It was a small thing. It changed everything. Mason's voice cracked. "This isn't over." I nodded. "No," I said. "It is just beginning." He stared at us, breathing hard, then turned and slammed through the door. The paper on the glass fluttered with the force and settled again. Closed for audit. Back soon. Nora wiped at her cheek with the knuckle of her hand. "What do you want me to do next?" "Go home," I said. "Feed the kids. Tell them I'll see them tonight. And answer his calls only when you're ready to hear the truth." She nodded and gripped the strap of her purse like a rope. Then she stepped forward and hugged me hard, the way she did when she was little, before life got complicated. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all of it." "Me too," I said, "but I'm not sorry for this." We let go. She walked to her car. I stood there a moment longer, the key heavy in my coat, the envelope's absence lighter than I expected, and I listened to the winter quiet. The line was drawn. The next step would be clean. Winter light hit hard and square. My phone woke before the kettle. Ellis. Done. The realtor. Listing withdrawn. Lockbox removed a clipped note from the paper. Ownership dispute stalls downtown restaurant. I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet Evelyn once used for spelling lists. Same gravity. Different lesson. I drove to the lake. The red ribbon stake was gone. The chain sagged across the post like a tired arm, but my gate was mine again. The porch rail still held the warmth of old hands. I walked the dock and set our names into the cold. Nora, Lily, Ben, Evelyn. The lake carried them back unbroken. A neighbor texted a photo, the lockbox leaving in the crook of a realtor's elbow. Figured you'd want this. I did. I saved it and put the phone away. I kept my eyes on the water until my pulse slowed. On the way home, I rolled past the restaurant. White paper on glass, closed. A delivery truck paused, then pulled off. Inside, Mason tugged at a door that no longer answered to him, then glared at the sign like print could be bullied. He spotted me, tried on disbelief, then bravado. I gave him a simple geometry he'd understand. A point to the sign, a point to the ground under his feet, a hand to my chest. He mouthed a threat I couldn't hear. My reply didn't need a voice. Loud isn't strong. Dusk fell like a curtain. The house filled again. Wet boots, small laughter. The clatter of bowls. Evelyn once laid out like a ritual. Lily brought me a folded paper heart. Ben asked if the cabin was still ours. I said soon, and felt the word fit. We ate, we cleared, the ordinary dignity of plates and a running tap. Nora stood at the counter, palms flat on the wood. He packed a bag, she said. He's at his brother's. No drama, just a woman facing the weather. He said I had to choose, she added. I told him I already did. Silence, full and clean. I poured cocoa for the kids and gave her the terms as simple as bone. The cabin stays with me. I fund the children, not the man. My door is open to you and them. Closed to him until he learns to speak like a man. She nodded. Not weak. Decided. A phone chimed once on the table. Mason's name. Nora turned it face down. Not on my father's floor. We sat. Lily leaned into my side. Ben fell asleep mid-cartoon. Snow ticked at the window. I looked at the key, the notice, the stone, and understood what the day had made true. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I remembered who I was. I took back what was mine. I made the world around me honest. When the people you raise try to write you out of your own life, do you swallow it? Or do you pick up the pen and write the ending yourself? What would you do? Please share your opinion in the comments.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.